presentation is on domestic violence as the topic, which was covered in Chapter 11 on relationships and health. The title of my PowerPoint presentation is Gendered Implications of Domestic Violence. The PowerPoint presentation will focus on domestic violence between genders as discussed in Chapter 11. Chapter 11 studies intimate partner violence in coupled relationships. It talks about who is more likely to be perpetrators of abuse, men or women. It also includes characteristics of male and female perpetrators and victims of abuse, which are explained. It offers theories that view men abusing women as a reflection of the imbalance of power in the relationship. I will talk about gender roles, cultural norms, and behaviors that influence domestic violence situations. In particular, I will focus on violence that occurs among intimate partner relationships, which includes violence in heterosexual relationships, as well as violence that occurs in homosexual relationships. I will also talk about domestic violence occurrences among people of color, in other cultures, and in countries around the world. I chose the topic of domestic violence to examine this form of abuse as one of the biggest social health problems among men and women in society. Domestic violence is considered to be a societal epidemic that can affect people regardless of their race, age, socioeconomic status, gender, religious background, ethnicity, and so on. Domestic violence can take many forms, including intimate partner abuse, child abuse, sexual abuse, and violence among the elder population. Domestic violence is a pattern of destructive actions that result in coercive behaviors which are used as a power tactic by abusive perpetrators to control a victim. Gender norms and societal expectations can influence emotional, physical, and sexual abuse in intimate relationships. Domestic violence occurs in heterosexual relationships, in the LGBTQ community, among people of color, in different cultures, and in countries worldwide. It can affect anyone, anywhere. This slide includes current issues and climates surrounding domestic violence. I offer some statistics of domestic violence for male and female domestic violence victims. More than 3 women and more than 1 in 4 men in the United States have experienced intimate partner violence in their lifetime. 89% of those who experience more than one incident of physical violence are female. Women are more likely than men to experience multiple forms of abuse. Women are also 3.5 times more likely to be killed by a partner or ex-intimate partner as opposed to a man. The history of domestic violence between men and women. Men often use violent tactics to maintain power in coupled relationships. Traditional patriarchal beliefs have historically allowed men to control women to maintain power in a relationship. Dating back to Roman civilization, men felt that they were entitled to authorize full control over their female partner at all times, and they often viewed women as property. The Code of Hammurabi is the oldest written legal code that included provisions which gave men the right as head of a household to murder, assault, or sell a wife into slavery for a specific time frame if the wife did not comply to the terms of their relationship. For instance, if a wife did not agree with certain household rules, the Code of Hammurabi granted men the right to abuse their spouse. The Rules of Marriage, which was drafted in the 1400s, included principles that entitled men to act violently toward their wife in order to keep a wife in line. Even after American colonization, male authoritarianism continued to invade all parts of society, including intimate relationships. Women were denied many basic human rights, and the problem with female victimization of intimate partner abuse was largely ignored. The evolution of the women's movement. The women's movement in the 1970s was a social movement largely based in the United States that sought equal rights and opportunity and greater personal freedom for women. Because of this movement, shelters for battered women began to emerge. Women started to pursue protective services against their abusive partner, and women began to gain equal opportunities. However, despite the progression of female equality that stemmed from the women's movement, men continued to dominate intimate relationships and abuse their partner to maintain power and control over a victim. Social role theory to explain domestic violence between genders. Societal views have always depicted men as tough, protective, authoritarian figures that dominate women at home or in household settings. On the other hand, girls have been taught to obey their male counterpart, be kind, and submissive in relationships. Social norms have created acceptable behaviors and standards for male violent behaviors. For instance, violence among men is considered to be normal and makes men masculine. Stereotypical social constructs have taught men to feel entitled to women. Social role theory continued. Traditional domesticated gender roles that require women to serve men allow men to feel power and control in a relationship. Women are expected to be subservient to a man's sexual desires, to the household demands, and other requests that a man may want. If a woman does not comply or obey her husband's orders, he may resort to violence as a way to exert control and power in the relationship. Gender roles can also teach women to accept the abusive behaviors by a man, which could also prevent women from seeking professional help as a victim. Women's progression in employment opportunities can create power imbalances in a relationship. Women have started working better, higher paid jobs, which have the potential to create power imbalances between a man and a woman. Men may feel devalued, which can create tension and cause them to act violent toward their female partner. Gender similarities in domestic abuse situations. Although male entitlement continues to be a problem in domestic violence situations, there are gendered similarities for perpetrators of abuse and victims between men and women. Men and women can both initiate abuse in a relationship. Gender similarities in domestic violence can be viewed in situational episodes of abuse. Situational violence doesn't result from stereotypical norms that cause aggressive behavior, but rather it is caused from stressful events that may cause a man or a woman to act violent. The characteristics of male and female perpetrators of abuse are also similar. Most perpetrators of abuse have witnessed, been exposed to abuse as a child, or they were made a victim of abuse, and learn that behavior, which they can carry into adulthood and may act violently against their partner. Men and women can also both be victims of abuse. About 40% of women and 30% of men have experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. There are also gender differences in domestic abuse situations. Men and women in heterosexual relationships may use different forms of abuse that may have different psychological or physical consequences for a victim. For instance, females are more likely to be perpetrators of verbal aggression, such as name-calling, yelling, verbal threats, and so on. Women are also more likely to use objects to abuse a man. Men, on the other hand, are more likely to beat up or strangle their partner. Men are more likely to cause physical or psychological injury to their partner, and thus they are more prone to face criminal charges. Gender differences continue. Men also try to exert more control in a relationship. Marital dependency affects women more than men. This relates to the gender role theory. Women are often economically and emotionally dependent on their male partner, which can enhance their tolerance for abuse. Women are more likely to be killed by an intimate partner and are 5 times more likely to experience sexual assault. Men are not as likely to seek help as victims of abuse. Men may face a strong negative stigma that is attached to unmasculine victim stereotypes, which may prevent men from disclosing violent acts that are made against them, especially by a female partner, more so than women who are victims of abuse. Circumstances can change in domestic violence situations for people in the LGBTQ community who identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. Although rates of violence are similar among gay men and lesbian women in intimate relationships when compared to people in heterosexual relationships, tactics that are used to exploit a victim differ compared to couples in heterosexual relationships. A homosexual perpetrator of abuse may threaten to reveal or disclose their partner's sexual orientation or gender identity to others. This can also prevent victims from seeking professional help due to fear of discrimination. Transgender individuals suffer from even greater forms of victimization. Transgender people are more likely to experience harassment, intimidation, and sexual violence in public. Abusive strategies in the LGBTQ community also include more shaming and manipulation in violent situations. Circumstances can also be different for people of color. Intimate violence is often a family secret in African American communities. African American females are 3 times more likely to die in domestic violence occurrences. Female victims feel obligated to protect the Black community and instead often focus on racial issues. Victims often fail to report abuse due to a lack of trust toward law enforcement. African American men may also have trouble finding employment, which can lead to stress and cause violence at home. African American women face pay disparities which make them vulnerable to abuse. African American women may feel helpless from the lack of financial independence that they are experiencing. They put up with abuse from a man because they may feel that they have no other options for help or to escape the abusive situation because they are having financial difficulties. Circumstances can also change for people in different cultures who experience domestic violence. Domestic violence is a problem for women in cultures under extreme duress due to poverty and lack of education or opportunities. Native American women often fall victim to abuse from men because of poverty brought on by loss of land or resources. Their male partners may experience stress because of the loss of land or resources and take it out on their female partner. In Middle Eastern cultures, women who leave a potential spouse and call off a marriage may be attacked with sulfuric acid, which there is a picture on the right, that can lead to permanent disfiguration and scars. Men may act out of revenge and retaliation against them for ruining their masculine reputation, power, and the control that they once had in the relationship. Circumstances can also change for people in countries around the world. Domestic abuse is often more damaging for women victims in countries outside of the United States. For instance, men often view their wives as property, especially in regards to their sexuality. In Japan, men are entitled to assault their wives regardless of a woman's socioeconomic or social status. In Islamic countries, religious practices and societal norms approve male abusive behavior. Patriarchal societies and countries that define masculinity in regards to power and dominance often create difficult circumstances for female victims to avoid abusive situations and seek help as victims. How can we as individuals be agents of change? First and foremost, it is important to prevent episodes of abuse among intimate partners. There are many steps that individuals and society can do to be agents of change in domestic violence among couples. People can raise awareness about problems that female and male victims may experience in abusive relationships. We can remove the negative stigma that is attached to male victims of abuse so men can pursue treatment options as a victim. It is also important to teach communities about the formation and existence of gender roles that contribute to violent situations. Eliminating gender inequalities and power imbalances can create structure and stability in an intimate relationship, which can reduce or eliminate abusive situations. Negative stereotypes must also be examined and removed that allow men to dominate domesticated environments. Last, it is important to acknowledge that battering will not be accepted or tolerated from male and female perpetrators alike. Change within cultural and societal norms that influence violent tendencies must be addressed at individual, political, legal, and worldwide sectors to reduce acts of violence. And on the next 2 slides, I included the references that I used to make this PowerPoint presentation.